Last week's video went well enough. It was fun just to kind of talk through something and make sense of it as I went. That's usually the process of writing for me. Writing kind of helps me wrap my head around something. It was fun to do that with video. And so I'm going to try that again today with another topic. Actually, this campaign I'm going to talk about comes from Little Canyon as well. It's from Alta, their new video, The Soul of Alta. So the reason I love this campaign is because it's really good, in my opinion, it's really good storytelling. Now, storytelling, some of you have already cringed at my use of the word storytelling, and that's totally fair because it's a word that I think has lost a lot of its meaning in the world of marketing. We have everyone, people who are writing ads. We have people who are designing, header graphics. Everyone's a storyteller. And while that is true to a degree, I think that sometimes kind of muddies the water and when we really do need to tell an honest to goodness story. If you've read Slope Fillers before, you know that, or you might know, I won't say that, I've written a lot of garbage that I'm sure not everyone's read, but you may have seen me talk about my definition of stories, which is stories are things that give moments meaning. And I'm going to bend that a little bit today just to say stories are things that give things meaning, not just moments. I love the alliteration of moments meaning, but I think it's sometimes too narrow. It works for me, but I want to do this in a way that makes sense to everybody. So let me give you an example of that. What I mean by stories give things or moments meaning. Let's say that you are, I don't know, you're flying to Dallas and you're about to board the plane. You've flown to Dallas 100 times. Maybe you're from Dallas. I don't know. But you notice someone in line with you. She's a little bit timid, a little bit anxious as she boards the plane. She steps off the jetway into the plane. But you don't think much of it, right? That's a moment. So if we tell the story of getting to that moment, suddenly that moment will have more meaning. So let's say you sat next to this woman before you boarded and you found out that she has never been on a plane before, ever. She's terrified of flying. But her sister, who she loves dearly, just found out that she has cancer. She's alone. She needs support. And so this woman is setting aside all these fears to go and be with her sister in this moment of need. Suddenly, just knowing those pieces of her story, the kind of how she got to right here in this moment, gives that moment of stepping off the jetway onto the plane so much more meaning, and it makes you care about it. And what's interesting for me is that telling more, I mean, I can tell those simple stories pretty easily, but telling more sort of complex stories has always been a little bit of a challenge for me. What I've found, though, is that telling more complex stories that add, some depth or some richness to that moment is often simply a matter of identifying more characters in that moment and then individually telling their stories about how they got to that point. And so sometimes I worry about if I bring more characters into the story, I need to weave it all together into this complex narrative, and that's not necessarily the case. You can simply tell the stories individually so that as you mention those pieces during the moment, when you describe the moment, suddenly that has more meaning. So let's tell some more stories about the characters in this. Let's say the flight attendant met her as well. They were working at the desk and she came up. She doesn't know how to fly, so she's asking some questions, and it finds out that we're both this flight attendant's mom is a cancer survivor. And so as she passes the jetway and this flight attendant just gives her a little side hug or whatever, that means something more. And let's say that the person's daughter is with her, and this daughter has never flown either, or this daughter lived with this sister and has a really deep bond and is absolutely terrified, hasn't flown either. The more people you add to this story, let's talk about the pilot, talk about the other people on the plane, whatever it is, the more people you add to that story, as this woman goes through this moment and interacts with these different people, these different characters, by simply giving context to each of those characters through little individual stories, suddenly all those different parts of the story have much deeper and more rich meaning. what I love about Alta's video is that they've really done this on a level that is very easy and simple to follow for normal people like us. It's incredibly well told, but it's done in a way that we kind of see those pieces broken out in ways that I really, really like. I don't know if this is how they plan to tell the story. This is just how I'm seeing it. So hopefully those things are kind of close. But as you watch the story of Alta, I want you to pay attention to the characters that they tell individual stories of before they just start talking about Alta as a whole. So you'll notice that the first thing that they talk about is skiing powder. This experience that we all know and love and understand, but if you've never skied Alta or if you've only skied in certain parts of the country, you may not truly appreciate at the level these people do. So that's the first character in Alta's story that they tell. Next, they tell about the history of Alta, which is really cool. Alta has a very, very cool history. So they kind of build that up and explain how Alta became Alta and why it is in the place where it's at. Then they talk about the geography and the location of Alta, how that works together to create some of that powder snow. I think they talk about avalanche control after that. And so you have all these pieces told individually, one at a time. And then around the 11-minute mark, you get to kind of that typical traditional resort story that's just all these faces, all these cool things about the resort. But you'll notice as you see the image, for example, of the avalanche cannon, well, that has more meaning because you just heard a very simple short story about how avalanche control work was basically invented at Alta. And when someone talks about the rich history of Alta, well, now that means more because you've just heard a very short story about that kind of how Alta got to where they are and why, for example, you look up and you don't see a lot of trees. Well, now you know it was clear cut during the mining days. And when people talk about that experience of it being worth shoveling all this snow for that skiing the powder, well, now you know what well, at least you've heard people talk about the joys of skiing powder, and you understand that that trade-off is worth it because of how incredible it is, or how soul-filling it is, or whatever the words were that they used. So I want you to pay attention to that. If you start at about the 11-minute mark to the end, it's a very typical resort story. Very well told, and other resort stories are very well told as well. But because of that kind of intro, because they tell the stories of the individual pieces and characters of the Alta story, it gives meaning to all those different pieces as they weave them together into the kind of main chunk of the story. So pay attention to that as you watch. This is incredibly well done. It's a really, really great video. The imagery is incredible. Alta has some amazing things to work with in terms of characters within their story. So they've done a great job of weaving those into something that gives the moment of arriving at Alta, the moment of skiing Alta, the moment of booking a trip to Alta, gives all those things much more meaning, makes people care much more deeply about the experience of doing so. So great work by those involved, great work Alta, and enjoy the movie.